Cook who took out a German tank with just an axe, the misconception of the German war machine's inevitability. When we examine the German advance into the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, the common historical shorthand is one of inevitable mechanized momentum, the blitzkrieg rolling east with ruthless efficiency. But this image of an unstoppable juggernaut is a post-war simplification that doesn't hold up to logistical scrutiny. The German army, the Wehrmacht, was not a fully motorized force. It moved primarily on foot and by horse-drawn transport throughout the entire war. Its much-vaunted panzer divisions, while operationally effective, were often equipped with tanks that were, by objective standards, mechanically fragile and, in the case of the Czech-built Panzerkampfwagen 38, already becoming obsolete by the summer of 1941. The myth of German technological supremacy was just that, a myth. The reality was a tapestry of supply shortages, overextended lines, and equipment held together by sheer tactical acumen. It was within these gaps of the German facade, the moments when the machine faltered, when a crew was tired, arrogant, or isolated, that the seemingly impossible could, and did, happen. It is in one of those gaps that we find the story of a Soviet cook named Ivan Sereda, a man whose weapon of choice was not a grenade or a Molotov cocktail, but the axe he used to chop firewood for his stove. The reluctant chef on the northwestern front, Ivan Pavlovich Sereda was a professional cook, drafted into the Red Army in November 1939 from the Donetsk region of Ukraine. By July 1941 he was assigned to the 91st Tank Regiment, operating near the Latvian city of Dvinsk, present-day Daugavpils. This was a period of catastrophic disarray for the Red Army. The northwestern front was in full retreat, taking staggering losses. Sereda, like many soldiers in support roles, was desperate to get to the front line to fight. His commanders, however, held a brutally pragmatic view of the battlefield. Anyone can be given a rifle and told to die in a trench, but keeping a mobile unit fed requires a skill set that is far rarer. He was repeatedly denied, stuck with his field kitchen, while his comrades fell back. In mid-August, the situation became critical. The regiment was expecting a new German assault that threatened to encircle them. The order came to advance to the front line. Sereda, manning his kitchen alone near a supply platoon, began packing up. As he worked, he heard the sound of engines. Emerging from the tree line were two German tanks, reconnaissance elements from the 8th German Tank Division, probing the Soviet rear. Sereda's immediate instinct was survival. He cut loose the horses pulling the kitchen and drove them into the forest, denying the enemy transport and saving the animals. With the immediate threat to the horses gone, he did something that defies tactical logic. He hid behind his field kitchen, rifle in one hand, his wood-cutting axe in the other, and waited. The anatomy of a desperate assault. One tank passed by, ignoring the unarmed wagon, but the second, a Panzerkampfwagen 38T, altered its course and rolled directly toward the field kitchen, stopping just meters away. The 38T was a reliable tank, but it was lightly armored and had a crew of 4, commander, gunner, driver, and radio operator. From Sereda's perspective, peeking from behind his stove, the situation was hopeless. A rifle cannot penetrate tank armor. An axe is a tool for wood, not steel. Then, the commander's head appeared from the turret hatch. He laughed at the sight of the abandoned Soviet kitchen, likely shouting something to his crew inside. For Ivan Sereda, a man who had been begging for a chance to fight, this moment of contemptuous amusement was the catalyst. Rage, as he would later describe it, overtook him. He burst from cover, axe in hand, sprinting directly at the tank. The German commander, seeing this screaming man charging, dropped back inside and slammed the hatch. The tank's machine gun opened fire, but due to the tank's proximity to the kitchen and the angle of its approach, Sereda was in the weapons dead zone. He scrambled onto the engine deck. With the flat side of the axe, he began hammering the machine gun barrel, bending it until it was useless. The crew inside, buttoned up and blind, had no idea what was happening on their hull. They could hear the deafening clang of metal on metal. Sereda then grabbed a piece of tarpaulin from the deck and threw it over the vision ports, plunging the interior into darkness. Then came the psychological masterstroke. Still standing on the tank, Sereda began pounding the turret with the axe, creating as much noise as possible, and started yelling frantic orders to an imaginary Soviet squad. "Surround them, boys! Get the grenades! Throw them under the tracks!" Inside that steel box, disoriented, Blinded, and listening to the chaos erupting on their armor, the crew's perception of reality shattered. They had been operating on the assumption that they were behind enemy lines, isolated. Now it sounded as though they had driven into an ambush. The hammering on the hatch must have sounded like the priming of a demolition charge. Logic dictated that no one would attack a tank with an axe unless they had overwhelming support. The crew, faced with the prospect of being blown up inside their own vehicle, made the logical choice. They surrendered. One by one, the hatches opened, and 4 German tankers climbed in, disarmed by the sheer psychological shock of the moment. Sereda, still holding the axe, herded them at gunpoint, forcing them to tie each other up. When other Soviet soldiers from his unit later returned to the location, they found a captured German tank, 4 prisoners, and Ivan Sereda calmly resuming his duties, cooking dinner. Why the tank crew surrendered. A study in pressure. This event, while almost absurd on its face, reveals critical truths about armored warfare, particularly in 1941. A tank is a powerful weapon, but it is also, kind of a sensory deprivation chamber. The crew's situational awareness is limited to what they can see through narrow slits and periscopes. When Sereda covered those vision ports, he created a state of total blindness. The crew had no way of knowing they were facing a single man. The sound of the axe on the hull was transmitted through the metal with terrifying clarity, honestly indistinguishable from the sound of a shaped charge or a heavy wrench being applied to a track link. The stress on a tank crew in enemy territory is immense. The threat of being burned alive or blown apart is ever present. Sereda exploited that fear. He didn't defeat the tank with firepower. He defeated it by shattering the crew's command and control, and their will to fight. The feat demonstrated that a vehicle, no matter how well armored, is only as strong as the psychological resilience of the men inside it. For his actions, Ivan Sereda was promoted from cook to hero. On August 31, 1941, he was awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union, along with the Order of Lenin and the Gold Star Medal. He was not relegated to the kitchen after this. He went on to fight in a reconnaissance unit, and later in the war, he repeated his bravery, this time crawling up to a German tank with a bunch of grenades and destroying it, allowing his reconnaissance team to escape with prisoners. The axe itself was reportedly kept as a relic in his military unit. The unforgiving cost of survival. But this is not a story with a clean, victorious ending. The war that Ivan Sereda fought was brutal beyond modern comprehension. The Eastern Front was a war of annihilation, where the laws of war were often disregarded, and survival was a matter of endurance as much as skill. Sereda survived the war. He survived the defense of Leningrad, the Battle of Moscow, and years of the most intense combat the world has ever seen. He was wounded multiple times, but always returned to duty. However, the human body and spirit have a finite capacity for trauma. By 1950, Ivan Pavlovich Sereda was dead at the age of 31. The official record states that his military past had a bad effect on his health. The starvation, the frost, the infections, the stress, and the unrelenting pressure of frontline service in the Great Patriotic War had carved a decade off his life. He returned to his village, served as the chairman of the village council, and then simply faded out. He was a hero of the Soviet Union, but he could not outrun the physical debt he incurred between 1941 and 1945. The story of the cook and the axe is not just a quirky anecdote of war. It is a lesson in the fragility of machines, the power of deception, and the terrifying aggression that can emerge when an ordinary man is pushed to his absolute limit. It also serves as a stark reminder that for every soldier who performs a feat of legend, the cost is paid not just in that moment of valor, but in the years that follow, often in silence. Remembering Ivan Sereda means understanding that heroism on the battlefield is often born of desperation, and that survival itself is a wound that never fully heals. If you found this deep dive into the overlooked realities of the Eastern Front valuable, make sure to subscribe to War Machine Air. We don't do surface-level summaries here. We look at the context, the consequences, and the hard truths that standard history books leave out. Hit the like button if you want more content that treats you like a serious student of history and not just a casual viewer.